That's the United Nations body dedicated exclusively to gender equality and protecting women's rights across the world. Iran, a country where women can be executed for adultery, where one woman recently received a death sentence for the crime of stabbing a man who was trying to rape her. I yesterday spoke with John Bolton, a former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and a Fox News contributor. Iran, now they're going to enforce women's rights in countries around the world. They're going to be the one who tells us how we need to treat women.
Right. Well, I know some people are probably outraged by this, and it is inexplicable unless you know the United Nations. And the real takeaway here is this is nothing new. This is a dog bites man story. This is the way the UN is. It operates this way all the time. So if you're outraged by this, it's not because the UN was humming along doing just fine and then suddenly a mistake was made. This is what goes on day in and day out.
How can this be? Why did we not object? Because our ambassador, Samantha Powers, came out and sent out a tweet expressing her outrage over this, saying, and I quote, "This is an outrage," but that's about it. You can see, she said, yet again it happened. This is an outrage, and people are wondering why she didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, well, because the way the UN electoral system works, it's through the regional group system. So there's rarely a vote on anybody. In this case, the Asia group had so many seats on the Commission on the Status for Women. They put up a number of candidates exactly equal to the number of seats, so there was no opposition at all. This is part of what's inherent in the UN system of I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. And it goes with what's fundamentally wrong with the UN, the principle of sovereign equality, one nation, one vote, they're all equal. Well, they're not in reality, but they are in the UN world.
This is such a joke. Iran has enforced the Islamic Penal Code. It values women's testimony in a court of law as half that of a man. It values a woman's life at half that of a man. Girls can be married at age 9. No woman can get married without the okay of her husband. In July of 2011 in Iran, a female prisoner committed suicide after violent beatings, including with electronic batons. And now their representatives are going to speak for women across the world.
Absolutely. And that, again, why do countries like Cuba and the Sudan get elected to the UN Human Rights Commission? If you're a human rights violator, if you believe in the principles Iran does on the status of women, it's precisely on the Commission on the Status of Women you want to be to protect yourself against criticism from other people who think maybe a woman's testimony should be equal to
because they said back at the annual session in March, this is just last month, they adopted only one resolution critical of any country on earth for violating women's rights. You know which country it was? Israel, for violating the rights of Palestinian women.
Right.
So what power does this group really have?
Well, fortunately, it's essentially irrelevant, like most UN bodies. And this is one of the reasons why I think people need to understand there's nothing aberrational about Iran winning these elections. This is the way the UN works. So when people in the future say, we should entrust this question to the United Nations, think again.
We're doing it. Is there any, can they really affect people's lives? Or is it more problems of omission? They don't do anything to correct situations like we see in their own country.
Well, in fact, to the extent they do have an impact, it's through passing resolutions critical, for example, of Israel. They're really using these institutions not for what their ostensible purpose is, but for a different political agenda, delegitimizing Israel, attacking the United States, undermining Western values. That's what's really going on. It's rarely reported because, let's face it, in this country, we don't pay attention to what goes on at the UN. But it's there, just like a coral reef building up over the years, undermining our values.
It's really incredible. What propaganda and what a joke. Ambassador, good to see you.
Glad to be here.
Unbelievable.